This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It is Geoff Mosher today in the house. And Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. We get one more sleep, Geoff Mosher, before the Eagles will have a new player. I guess the biggest question will be, will that new player be at number 22? There seems to be so much smoke around the campfire here about the Eagles moving out of this pick. So much so Daniel Jeremiah said 70% chance they move up, 30% chance they move out, and 0% chance they draft at 22. What is your thoughts a mere one day, less than 24 hours? I guess it's about 24 hours before the Eagles draft at number 22 is where they're slated, Geoff Mosher.
Well, Mike, I think the big thing when you talk about moving up or down the draft, we're gonna get a really good feel for whether how Howie Roseman sees his secondary, with James Bradbury right now at one corner and Darius Slay at another, and a bunch of guys, including now Isaiah Rodgers, right? Like 6 or 7 guys that are all going to compete for spots, but no real guy that jumps out at you. And we're going to see if that causes Howie Roseman into a desperation mode, because the two best corners in the draft are Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, based on what I've spoken to from NFL people. Doesn't mean they're going to go in that order. Obviously, there's Kool-Aid McKinstry and Nate Wiggins to follow, and some teams that just love speed, like the way the Raiders do, could make Nate Wiggins, maybe he'd be their cup of tea because of that. But the point is, at 22, it's hard to see all 4 of them be, or any of the 4 being available. So people like Daniel Jeremiah say you got to watch for a trade up. Well, the Eagles have 2 second-round picks and no third-round pick. So really, we're going to see how Howie Roseman feels about the state of his entire defense, because if he does have to use one of those 2 second-round picks to package with his first-round pick to move up, that really leaves him only with another second-round pick, no third-round pick before you get to day 3. That to me means you get 2 players out of the first 3 rounds, a corner and then maybe a linebacker or maybe a safety, but then you don't get that other player that I just mentioned, whether it's a linebacker or a safety. So this draft is an opportunity to replenish the defense, especially with some of the names that'll be available in day 2. And if Howie Roseman gives up a second-round pick to move up, we'll know how desperate he really was to finally land that impact corner that has eluded him in the draft, for him and the franchise, I should say, for over 20 years.
Yeah, it's funny because we have talked about they have not taken a corner in the Howie Roseman tenure, but that's not from lack of wanting a corner. They have wanted some. They just haven't been able to get them. So is this the year that Roseman says, I'm not waiting anymore. I'm going to be aggressive and go get one? Because in the past, we talked about this the other day. In 2014, they waited around and somebody jumped over them and took the guy they wanted, and they ended up with Marcus Smith. Okay, great. That didn't work out for you. So last year, instead of waiting around, they move up 1 spot to go get Jalen Carter. They weren't going to let someone jump over them again. They learned from their mistake. This time around, they wanted J.C. Horn. They like Patrick Surtain. If they want their guy, they're not going to be afraid to go move them, even though they haven't taken a corner, because, Geoff, that's the thing. Oh, they haven't taken a corner. They've wanted to take corners, just haven't wanted to take them in the spot that they were sitting in with who was on the board when it was their turn.
Right. They've had that instance come up. Then there are some corners that they thought that they were getting first-round talent in, like a Sidney Jones, picking him in the second round in 2017, never worked out. Took Rasul Douglas in the 3rd round, didn't work out. Zach McPherson in the 4th round. They were going to see if he could be a slot corner last year. He tore his Achilles. I sit here and say I would not blame Howie Roseman if he'd used a second-round pick to move up and go get Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold. It would be hard if whether you're a media guy or an Eagles fan, to really knock him for trying to get the best corner after years and years and really decades of not being able to do it. But again, this is a defense that needs guys, not just a corner, but at safety, at linebacker. and they need their picks, and they already gave a third-round pick up for Kenny Pickett. And, if they have to go from 2 first, second-round picks to 1, it just limits their ability to continue to replenish. So it's a tough predicament, right?
Yeah, well, if they're going to move up,
you can argue both ends of it.
If they're going to move up, Moshe, it would probably be 50 or 53. They're going to have to package to do so to make the jump that a lot of people anticipate. So that would be something you have to weigh. Do you want to give up that second round pick to move up, 8 to 10 spots? But as you said, then you don't have a third round pick. So you're only getting one guy in like the top 120 picks here. That player better be a home run pick for you.
Yeah, he absolutely better be a home run pick. You cannot afford to miss again on cornerback.
I take that back. You would get 2 guys because you're only going to have to trade one of your second round picks, not both of them.
Right, and it wouldn't shock me. Let's say he did trade. Let's say he traded the 53rd overall pick with the 22nd to move up to get a corner. It wouldn't shock me then if he took that 50th overall pick on day 2 and moved down in the second round to get a lower second round pick, maybe at the bottom, but then add an additional third round pick that he doesn't have right now, so that he does come out of the first 2 days in the draft with 3 players. Maybe not as 3 top 53 players, but you get 1 top 20 type player, top 15 player if you move up enough in the first round, and then you're, drafted in the second and third round a little lower, but at least you've got guys that you might like, or you identify as guys you think you can play.
By the way, 53, they have landed LaShawn McCoy at 53. They have landed Miles Sanders at 53. And on this day, they landed Jalen Hurts with the 53rd pick. So 53 has been pretty good for them. So if you're going to move one of them, move 50. How about that?
There you go. 53 is a magic number, they say. So
and 22 hasn't worked out as well. They ended up with Andre Dillard, and 21 was not very good either. They ended up with Jalen Reagor. So we'll see.
26, Marcus Smith. I mean, we did a whole podcast on the Eagles picking in the 20s over the last 5 to 10 years, and really has not been a great spot for them.
Well, 22 was also Justin Jefferson. So if you just do the right thing, you can get a player of that ilk, which would lead me to some other speculation, which is wide receiver. There have been some that think, hey, a wild card for this team could be wide receiver. Brian Thomas, 22, would be a guy in that spot. The Brock Bowers thing, I know he's not a wide receiver, but some think he could be like a slot, tight end, kind of split out into the slot there. So do you think a wild card is something that this team would do, or is it more, hey, stick with what you know, offensive line, there's a corner that we like, an edge rusher? Is it one of those 3 or the wild card? What do you like?
Yeah, I mean, the only way I see them going wide receiver at 22, and I never slam the door on it, is if just the way the board falls, there's some prizes, you get a lot of trade action, the tackles are gone, the corners are gone, you don't love the pass rushers there. I mean, if I were to make a list of likelihood of draft, if you're at 22, offensive line would probably be number 1. Pass rusher would probably, and I'm assuming, by the way, all 4 corners are gone by 22. If not, you throw corner in there, but offensive line, then pass rusher. But then the third one would probably be wide receiver, because it's not going to be safety or linebacker, and probably not tight end there.
Yesterday, the Eagles got Isaiah Rodgers back. So while we're talking about corner, let's throw him into the room here. And does that change anything? What does he bring? What does he do? For the people out there, they signed him in 2023. He was suspended for the year for gambling. But he is a younger option, and he's an interesting guy. So how does he factor into this team in 2024, and what kind of role might he have? And does that change anything on draft night?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like right now the Eagles' cornerback situation, Mike, outside of Darius Slay, is like just a big cauldron of stew of stuff, like everything you find in a stew, right? There's an Isaiah Rodgers, there's an Eli Ricks, there's a Josh Jobe, there's a this, there's a that. I mean, and they're all kind of there, and whichever one rises and boils when the stew gets is maybe somebody who's got a good chance to make the team. But then there's the question of, well, does that mean that they're a good team, right? I mean, being the best of these reserve corners and stepping up doesn't exactly mean you're going to be a great player or be really, helpful for the team. So last year we saw Josh Jobe have a great training camp. And when James Bradbury got hurt? I forget. No, when Maddox got hurt and they moved Bradbury outside, you saw Jobe get the first crack. Then it wound up being Eli Ricks, and then it was Keely Ringo by the end of the year. So it's just a big cauldron right now of bodies.
There is.
Adam Kaplan we love to say, depth isn't the number of bodies you have at a position. Depth is the number of bodies that you think can play and make an impact. You don't have to be a star, but you have to be able to hold your own on the field. And I'm not quite sure the Eagles should be comfortable about all their depth, despite their numerous bodies at that position.
Yeah, that's the thing, is there's a lot of guys who have got a little bit of playing time, but no one, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this. See what you think. Have any of the guys of that group stood out? Jobe, Ricks, Mekhi Gardner, Kaylee, any of those guys stand out as, this guy, and McPherson's a guy they drafted high and got hurt, hasn't really helped them out at all. So there's a lot of interesting stories, but none of them seem to be one that I want to read.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part is a guy like Ringo, 4th-round pick, Georgia. Everybody gets excited about the Georgia players, but so far, I'm not sure any of them giving you a real reason to be excited about them yet. He's a guy who was a great athlete, top corner coming out of high school, I believe, out of Scottsdale. But the thing about him, tall, physical, stiff-hipped, not as fluid as you would like from an outside corner. So you're giving up something to get something in the physicality there. And we saw him play last year, and there were times where you're like, okay, it was all right. It was pretty good, but nothing that made you say that's my guy for the next 5 to 6 years at the slot, or at the spot, I should say. I thought Eli Ricks, of all the corners, was given the toughest assignment because they had to jockey him back and forth between outside nickel, and he did the best that an undrafted rookie could do. And there were times where you're like, okay, at least he's accountable and holding his own. But the bottom line is nobody showed you anything last year, including your starter, James Bradbury, that would give you confidence going into this year.
Yeah, well, Bradbury is a wild card in itself, right? I mean, it's the wild card of Bradbury is, do the Eagles look at him as we want to give him another shot, or we're looking to draft a guy and make him a post June 1st?
Hey, it's possible. You saw what and this is not apples to apples, but you saw how last year, right? The Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. They turned around and traded DeAndre Swift to the Eagles the next day. You wonder if the Eagles get a first-round corner. Is there something they do? Is somebody willing to give up anything, a 5th, a 6th? I'm sure the Eagles would take anything at this point. For James Bradbury.
So is that something that you're watching, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Is a Bradbury move?
It's if they draft a corner, I'll wonder if something's up. I mean, different teams see guys differently. Look at Kevin Byard, right? Nobody would say Kevin Byard played really well for the Eagles last year. Nobody would say he's on the rise. Nobody would say he's a young guy who's got his best days ahead of him. The Bears signed him anyway for $8 million. Somebody could look at James Bradbury and say he was on a bad defense. There was miscommunication, played terribly. I'm not saying it's likely, but for a 6th-round pick, I'll take him as my 3rd corner. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Over at Inside the Birds podcast, Greg Cosell, you guys did the intel of the guy. Are there something of a player that kind of stood out about any of the players that we keep hearing that intrigues you? Because you guys tracked, 2 guys really, you got linebackers, Trotta. Edgerrin Cooper's a guy that I really like. I just don't – he seems like the Eagles would be in no man's land to kind of get him. Cooper DeJean is one that a lot of the fans seem to like. Nate Wiggins seemingly was in a lot of mock drafts earlier. He seems to be less in mock drafts now. You got Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold, the 2 Alabama guys. Arnold seems to be more in the top 15 with Mitchell. So anything in that Greg thinks about fit for the Eagles with some of those players?
I do remember Greg talking about a corner that you're just now starting to hear a little bit more on, but Greg was on him for a little bit on our platform, and that's the Iowa State cornerback. His name is TJ Tampa. This is also someone that Andrew DiCecco has written about on InsideTheBirds.com. Greg, I believe, made the statement of, I don't really understand what makes TJ Tampa a second-round pick compared to some of the guys that we just mentioned going in the first round. He really likes him, thinks he's a good corner, and thinks his tape is really good.
Well, guess what? You take a look at, I know Andrew, who will be on tomorrow, by the way, he's been raving about Max Melton, too, another guy that he likes. So some of those second-round guys, 50, 53, keep those in mind there. And as I mentioned, Cooper, the linebacker, they're like in no man's land, kind of 50. He's probably somewhere between 22 and 50. He would probably be out of the range. But, man, if they got lucky enough that someone like that fell to them at 50, kind of like the Dean thing, I think this would be a big different situation. But I think he would probably step in and start right away, no?
You talking about Max Melton?
No, Cooper, Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker.
Edgerrin Cooper? Yeah, if he was there at 50, absolutely would probably do that. And same thing with Max Melton, by the way. I from what we understand, Max Melton, it seems like the floor, ceiling, I forget how you would describe it in numbers, but like 40. Top 40, guy. I don't know that he gets past 40. And, once the run on corners goes in the first round, you'll start to see second round movement, right? Teams trading up to get corners because there'll be a pretty steep drop off after probably the top 50, top 60 players there. So, yeah, both those guys, Cooper, Melton, DeJean, if he gets into the second round. Those are guys that are not just going to fall to a team. Those are guys that you're probably going to see teams go get if they start to tumble just a little bit outside the top 35, 40.
Yeah. Last thing for you, Geoff. I know we're getting ready for the draft, and there's always a ton of stuff happening, but the offensive line is generally where this team feels the safest. There's a couple guys that can do the guard thing and then move out, but would you be surprised if they took someone who is a tackle only?
No, I would not be surprised if they took someone who was a tackle only. The Eagles value the position. There are times where they believe that even if he is a tackle only, we can maybe make him into a guard. But look, Lane Johnson has battled a lot of injuries over the last few years, and there really is some question about how many more years he's going to play. There are a couple of these tackles like Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma and Amarius Mims from Georgia that might need a year of the Stoutland tutelage, just like Cam Jurgens did, right? Because Cam Jurgens was only a center for 2 years. That would help them. So I don't think that there's any issue they have. If there's a really good offensive tackle they have a first-round grade on, and if they're not sure he can play guard, I don't think that's going to stop them from taking him.
Okay, well, that's going to be another interesting storyline because if they stick around at 22, there'll be a lot of options for that whole situation. And that would be an interesting, I think like Mims is a guy who's probably a tackle only, very raw. I would not be thrilled if that's what they ended up doing, is taking a guy who basically would have no shot at getting on the field that first year. But they've done that before. Nolan Smith did not play a whole heck of a lot last year. And hopefully,
well, I'll tell you what, it wouldn't be no shot. There's the opportunity. I mean, there's always injuries, right? And we've seen that a lot, especially with Lane Johnson. And B, for the people who still love the run, can you imagine sticking Guyton, a huge guy, 6'8" guy, or Mims, another enormous guy, great athlete, out there on certain first and second downs just to give Barkley an extra blocker? I mean, you can find a good way to use. In fact, the Eagles did that with Isaac Seumalo in 2016 when they drafted him. And he was a third-round pick, but they put him in on the field plenty as he started to progress as a sixth offensive lineman. So and it worked for them. They got a lot of usage out of that. Gotcha. So they'll find a way to get a good player on the field, Mike.
All right. Well, it all unfolds tomorrow night. Geoff Mosher will be back on Monday to recap the entire 7 rounds of the draft. We'll see what the Eagles do. Will there be a big trade? Will there be something? By the way, I'm a proponent of, if somebody wants to give me an established player for 22, you can have 22. Thanks for playing.
Like a cornerback, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be ideal. But if someone said, hey, here's an established player, we want 22, I'm okay with that. I mean, a lot of people,
that's fair.
In the society that we live in, Geoff, everybody wants what's behind door number 2. They're so like, I want to see what you would do if we had that pick, rather than just getting the player. I'll take the player. I don't need to see what they would have done had 22, because guess what? Most of the time, the player who's established is the better player.
Yeah, just take a look at the Eagles' history of picking in the 20s, as we talked about. You would take the established player.
Well, and the year they traded for A.J. Brown, some of the drafted wide receivers after Brown, none of them are any good. Traylon Burks, I will take the established wide receiver in that role. You can have the guy in the draft. Have fun with that. In this situation, if you told me you could have Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry, some of these corners in the 22 range, and you want to give me, let's say, Patrick Surtain, I don't think you would get that deal for 22, but I'll take Patrick Surtain. Thank you very much.
Every day of the week.
Absolutely. All right, Moshe, where are you watching the draft? What are you guys doing for the draft tomorrow?
All right, so we got a lot of stuff going on. We have a NFL draft preview show that'll drop sometime right around maybe 4 or 5 o'clock. That's got myself, Kaplan. It's got Greg Cosell, and special guests from the Senior Bowl executive director, Jim Nagy, who is just awesome. He has so much intel. He probably watches as much tape, if not more, than Greg Cosell. So that'll be our preview show. And then when the pick is made, it'll be myself and Andrew DeCecco to recap it on our YouTube and podcast platforms. Saturday, me and DeCecco wrapping up picks, and Friday. And on Saturday, it'll be Kaplan and DeCecco wrapping up Andrew's favorite day, which is, rounds 4 through 7.
All right, check out the Inside the Birds podcast for reaction, the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. And, of course, Football at 4 tomorrow with Andrew, Friday with Adam. Jeff's back on Monday to recap it all. The NFL Draft tomorrow night is on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Jeff.
You got it, Mike. Take care.